Welcome to Bandit's Keep. I'm Daniel. This week we're going to talk about city crawls. So we've already talked about dungeon crawls, and I'm working on a video for wilderness crawls or hex crawls, but I wanted to take some of the knowledge, we've talked about hex crawls before, I think it's okay, to create something a little different. In the Basic and Expert book, we have, of course, those two things, right? Dungeons and wilderness. But we all know that exploring in cities and towns is awesome. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how I handle that, how we can combine the two processes, and why we might do it. Also, this week we have a sponsor, Only Crits. So if you're not aware of Only Crits, they've been around for a while now. They make amazing dice. They make the supplements and adventures. And if you watch my actual play channel, I use their dice a lot, the little duck ones. They're like D6s with ducks inside. They're pretty sweet. Anyways, they've got a brand new Kickstarter launched today, Guillmans Guide to Speed. It's all about racing and speed, and there's monsters and spells and all kinds of other cool stuff. I'm going to talk a little bit about that as we get going, but let's just jump into this first. So we can look at our city adventures in a couple of different ways. I mean, first of all, there's just, I don't care about that, and I just want to go to the town and buy some stuff and go to the tavern and get a rumor and leave. But I'm talking about actually adventuring in the urban location. Whether you're going to build a whole campaign or you're going to just do a, one or two adventures in the spot or just that day, right? So there's two ways to look at it. If we look at it from the dungeon point of view, imagine a tightly packed urban environment, buildings stacked on top of each other. In areas, if the sun's not directly overhead, it might even be dark during the day, right? Laundry draped across the things, smell, people moving around. This could be treated like a dungeon crawl, right? We're walking down these streets. We can't look around. We can't identify where we are except by the buildings around us. And we go down alleys and we go around corners. And again, we can treat the process of going through this exploration as a dungeon crawl. And we can combine it with the second thing I'm going to talk about in a second, but let's just go a little deeper into this. Now, one thing we're going to keep in mind here, though, is in a dungeon, usually it's just empty, right? And you're kind of wandering around, and all of a sudden you see a giant spider and you fight it. In a city crawl, there's always going to be people. So you want to think about your people, your kind of NPCs, not even as NPCs in this case. You want to think of them as window dressing. So when you're going through a market square, 90% of those people there are just they're like having paintings on the walls or vases or, whatever. So, a player enters a room and there's like a chest to look at and there's a tapestry on the wall. That's what we're talking about here. You're going to treat it just like that. You come into this space and the player characters are going to go, oh, we're in a market square. I'm going to look around. Do I see any fruit vendors? And then you're going to operate it like that, right? You're going to think about what's in the space, what they can see there, how they can interact with it. And most of these NPCs, unless they're somebody you really care about, might just be very basic, or there might be a major conflict or stuff to be learned. It really depends on the location, just like in a dungeon. Some rooms have treasure, some rooms are empty, some rooms have a monster, some rooms have NPCs. It's just like that. And we can walk through it the same way. We can even have the player characters map as they go. Right? You just tell them, listen, you're going into the old district here where people are often lost and people actually bring rations with them because they might get lost. So you might want to keep a map, and you can actually really treat it like that. Do it turn by turn. They're moving slowly, going through crowds. What do I see? Okay, well, on the left and right, you see some what appear to be apartment buildings. Over here, we see an alleyway going down with a smell coming from it. Who knows what? You see some rats running across. Some eyes light up in the thing. Oh, over there you hear some noise. Oh, there's a building you can go into. There's a market square, right? We're treating the outside space like a dungeon. So this can be really, really fun and a great way to do, again, that really congested, packed. You're looking for that one person that left, society, let's say a sage that knows something, know too much, right? And they move to this like tightly packed urban place and they're hiding. Wasn't there an Incredible Hulk movie like that? One of the ones where he was like off, I think he might have been in Brazil and he was, working in this very tight community. Anyways, let me know in the comments below. So the other way we can do this, let's jump to the other side and then we'll start talking about procedure. The other way we can do this is more like a wilderness hex crawl. And in this case, we treat it like a point crawl. We wouldn't worry about, okay, this part of the city, because you don't want it to be slow and tedious. Because remember, in hex crawls, we're moving a full day per move. So we want this to be, okay, you're going from the tavern to the large temple. It is maybe 2 moves away. And you're going to, okay, do you know how to get there? Maybe. Do you have a map? Okay, might you get lost? You might not have to actually map this, you can do it in your head. But again, you're going to have things you're going to interact with. And a lot of that can be narrative, just like a hex crawl. So we're moving around the city, but there's still a chance of not knowing where you're going. Especially if you're like my player character groups that don't ever want to tell NPCs anything, so they never truly get good directions, because they're always like, well, we don't want to tell this NPC we're going to that temple because they might be up to something. I don't know why they're so suspicious. But anyways, you know, this is just one way to do it, and we can actually move around and use these procedures. So let me walk into this in a second, but first, let's talk about Guillmans' Guide to Speed. This is a supplement for 5th edition. It's all about racing and speed. So you've got your ground racing, you've got your air racing. You've also got monsters that are kind of speed elementals and stuff like that. You've got new spells, new magic items, new all kinds of great stuff. One thing that really stands out that I think is super cool with this is the idea that you can build a vehicle. So to me, that is something that I think it's not always kind of involved in all the games that I play, but a lot of times it goes there. People want to like build something together, create something together. And sometimes the players will figure a way to do that. Sometimes they won't. Sometimes they're off trying to make a battle wagon. You know, sometimes they're trying to make a castle, right? In this case, we've got some mechanics for it. We actually have a system where the player characters can create their own vehicle for racing, for traveling, and you can equip it with different magic items. You can, you know, there's like mechanics for how fast it goes, for power sources. And it's really cool because it gives you a lot of options. But not only that, for on the DM side of it, there's 30 vehicles included. So obviously you could use those as vehicles the player characters could just get to kind of inspire your players to go in that direction. Or you could use them obviously for the NPCs, making it so you don't have to build a bunch of vehicles unless you really like to. You want to get on this one early, guys, because there's a great early backer reward. You get yourself a nice Flux Gearshift dice set and exclusive Guillmans Sigil PU leather dice bag. This is all free, of course, for the first 2 days. And for anybody who backs, you just got to pay shipping. That'll all be handled after the fact, obviously. There's lots of stretch goals. There's lots of add-ons, all this other stuff. But when they sent me this information, because I'm recording this a couple of days before it launches, it's not all 100% finalized, but obviously it is now. So if you think you'd love to add arcane punk or racing or building your own vehicles into your campaign, definitely check this one out. There is a link in the description below. Again, for the first couple of days, you get yourself a free set of dice, so that's definitely worth looking at. If this isn't your jam, still check out Only Carrots. They're a great company. Like I said, they do all kinds of supplements and adventures and make some pretty amazing dice, so check them out. Thanks so much. Let's get back to the video. Okay, let's talk process. So I'm just going to go through, we've talked about this before, so I'm just going to kind of talk about it a little bit now. I'm going to do I'm going to jump into the basic book here. Again, I'm on my iPad. If you're new to the channel or you just haven't seen any of these videos, I tend to use the Basic Expert set from 1981, often called Moldvay Basic or BX. This has been cloned many, many times, and most recently and most successfully, I think, was OSE. So if you're using OSE, it's the same process. It's just a different book. I prefer to use the originals. I'll put links to all of that in the show notes below. Okay. DM roles for wandering monsters. So this is now we're going into the tightly packed quarters, right? So you're going to, maybe this is even part of a larger city. You go into this strange area and you're like, all right, the DM's like, all right, well, you see this, road going down. There's people everywhere. There's some people trying to sell things on the corners. You see a couple of vagabonds, setting up little tents on the corner. There's like a fire burning. You describe how you want to describe this thing, right? And then then you're going to roll to see if there's going to be a wandering monster. Now, we're going to talk about that in 1 second because I'm going to handle this the same way for both this style and the other style. Assuming that there is, so you roll so you know if it's going to come up or not. Then the party moves at their full movement rate. They enter places, they interact, they do whatever. If there's no monster, they move to the next step. If they do encounter a monster, then we go through the procedures of interacting with the monster. This is exactly a dungeon crawl. Do it the same way. Keep the same procedure. Again, you don't have to be so, this is how we're doing it, especially if you're not using miniatures, but just in your head, okay, remember, this is what I'm doing. I'm rolling. Okay, were you going down this way? Okay, you going that way? Okay, you're describing things, you're moving through, they're encountering things, right? Now let's look at the other style. The other style, of course, is like a wilderness hex crawl. Let's look at the expert book. Okay, so again, this says order events in 1 game day because 1 game day is a turn in hex crawling. I would probably do this 1 hour in a city. Seems reasonable if it's a decent sized city. Again, we're going from the tavern to the temple. How long is that going to take approximately? Maybe 1 turn, maybe 2 turns, maybe 3 turns, depending on how big the city is, how congested it is, how direct the paths are, right? They say where they want to go. We're going to go north to the temple. Wonderful. We roll to see if you get lost. You're lost. If they're lost, we roll a random direction they end up in, and then we basically look at where they're at and we adjudicate from there. Now, of course, they can correct their course. Lots of things can happen if they have a map or a guide or they've been there before. I wouldn't worry too much about the getting lost part, but we're assuming here that we're exploring for the first time. Much like the dungeon crawl, we roll for wandering monsters. But if you notice, we roll it here at the end, and the reason for that is because it's based on where you end up, right? If you start off in the tavern district, you might have certain monsters, as it would be, that you could encounter. If you end up in the temple district, there'll be different monsters, right? So keeping in mind that in BX, everything that's not a player character basically is a monster, including NPCs. They just use the word monster for all of that. Similar to the way that creatures often used in later editions for all humanoids, basically monster is used. Assuming that the player characters are not lost, and assuming they get to where they're going and there's not a wandering monster, you just go to the next turn. So if it's going to take 2 turns to get there, you go, all right, well, that's way over on the other side of the city. It's going to take you 2 turns, so let's roll. Okay, you're not lost. Okay, there's no encounter. All right, well, you travel for about an hour, and now you're over in the market square. Describe it to him, give him a little a beat, and then move on. All right, you're going to continue to the temple? Yes, we are. Okay, roll to see if you get lost. Boom, and you just keep moving. Again, a procedure. You don't have to really be, again, and I always make a point of saying this, because one of the reasons why I'm doing these videos is because I think when you look at it on paper, it seems like it might not be fun because it's like not in character, but it is. You just have to use the rolls as a narrative tool, right? So, perfect. Now here's the part that I think is interesting and I want to talk about a little bit more. I've talked about this before, but I'm going to kind of make it specific to this right now, which is wandering monsters in the city, or in hex crawls when you're in a populated area. So let's look at the expert book here. And if we look, what we've got here is, depending on the place they are, so woods, river, swamp, there's a certain % chance that there might be an encounter. And then we have various monster types. So we look, we see men, humans actually. So you've got 1, it's a men, then 2, it's undead, 3, it's a humanoid, and then you've got men. So basically, if you're in a city, you're very likely to encounter humans, right? That's the most common thing you're going to encounter. Obviously, if you go to a dwarven city, you can just replace men with dwarves, or halflings if it's a halfling city, or elves. You could mix it up, you could use more humanoids. Again, you could do it any way you want. But what I would do is I would just keep men as whatever the predominant species race is in the city that you're in. So if you're in a place where it's all half-orcs, half-orc is the thing, right? Then you look over here and we can see for city, the suitable men, we've got bandit, trader, NPC party, adventurers, trader, blah, blah, blah. It goes right down the list. So if we're traveling through our city, let's say again, we're going from the tavern to the temple and we roll an encounter and we roll and we get men. We would roll a d12, we might get fighter. Now, fighter here has an asterisk, which we'll talk about in a second. That means it's a character class, so that's a leveled person. That's an encounter, right? You can, for whatever reason, you run into this fighter. And now you might be thinking, well, random fighter, what do I do? Whatever. This is where my system comes in a little bit. And let's talk about this a little bit. I'm going to jump over here to my notes. So I've already kind of structured this a little bit. Again, I talked about this a while back. I actually took this idea from a blog to which I cannot remember where I got it. So if you know where this came from, this blog thing, because most of these encounters are from there, let me know, because I would love to credit whoever it was that wrote it. It was years and years and years ago. I used it in my game before I was making these videos. Okay, so you roll twice on table 2A. In this case, it's 2 because of the hex crawl I was doing. And once on table 2B. So for instance, if I roll a 6, I've got madmen, and I roll a 4, I've got traveling to sea, then I roll a 1, villagers. So madmen, traveling to sea, villagers. That's what you come upon. So now looking at that other table, I've actually stretched this out to use the stuff from BX. We roll, and we roll a 5, trader, and we roll 3, enslaving, and then we roll, let's say, a 9, undead. Okay, that'd be weird, but hey, you know what? That might actually be okay. Where mostly enslaving would not be okay. Again, you can change these things to make them work for you based on the city you're in. Obviously, if you're in a place where enslaving would be against the law, then the party can react as they would. If it's even legal there, the party is still going to react the way that they would as, heroes and probably get involved, and that'll be awesome and cool, right? So You got betraying, worshiping, enslaving, traveling to sea. You can change all of those, right? You could also change the numbers. These are all of equal chance because, again, it's random, but you could flavor one. If we know there's a lot of people traveling to see stuff in the city, we could add more traveling to seas. So the list that I'm using here is effectively based on the list from the expert book, but I made 12 instead of 8 in order to kind of combine both lists, right? So effectively what we got here is Bandit, Trader, NPC Basic, meaning you use the basic NPC rules, which I think are first or second level characters, NPC Expert, which could be up to like 6th or 7th, and then you've got Trader, Veteran. Veteran is a first level fighter, basically, but it's not a character class first level fighter, and that's what's important. So in these games, a veteran is a first level fighter, but it's basically a monster, right? If it says fighter, that means it's an NPC, which means it could be somebody you could recruit to be a henchman. So that'd be the difference here. Trader, undead, merchant. I made undead very rare because I figure that it should be, right? Bandit and noble. And of course, all these are monsters in the BX system. And again, we can roll a couple of these. So let's go with making some dice. Okay, here we go. 12, 6, and 1. So we've got a noble negotiating with a bandit. Well, that's interesting. What's the story there, right? It's not just a bandit now, it's a noble negotiating with a bandit, which could be anything. Maybe they're being stuck up, right? Although there is stealing from, or actually there's not. There's not a robbing. So you could treat that as a robbery, right? Or you could add that to your list, right? Let's do another one. 10, 2, 6. A merchant worshiping a veteran. Interesting. So again, we can interpret that many ways, right? Worshipping typically means they're coming to a deity or something, but worshipping could also just be like kissing their butt or maybe sucking up to for whatever reason. And maybe that's because the veteran helped them or saved them, or they're trying to get the veteran to do something. This starts to inspire stuff. Because remember, when you're in cities, this is really the difference, right? When you are in the dungeon, almost everything in there is likely to be an enemy. You don't have to fight everything, but you're not likely going to be walking around the dungeon and hang out and have a coffee with somebody, right? It's going to be where here, it's a dangerous area where it's, oh, what's happening? When you're in the wilderness, same thing. You know, if you see a bunch of lions, they might look cute from a distance, but they ain't so cute when they're up in your face, right? So in the wilderness, everything's dangerous, right? But in a city, it's different. In a city, most of these things should either be incredibly mundane that just starts to feed adventure hooks, or positive or even negative, but social type encounters. So when you're making these lists, fill them with the right things, right? And if you're looking for somebody who's lost, let's say you want to do something like that, then I would just add them to the list. So again, I just took what was here. You could create whatever list you like. I often like my list. If you look at the very top list, which I think I changed the top part, but I just kept the other. I can't remember. Again, if I could find that blog, I will someday find it and we'll straighten all that out. But, you know, the top one has villagers, lord and retinue, knights, because again, it's meant for a hex crawl, madmen, wizards. So you could add that to your list. I'm just using the monsters that come here. I don't know if I'd put dragon in the city, but it depends on the city you live in, right? Oh, so I should also point out the way I said NPC expert, NPC basic. What I did here is I made a chart down here. I just call it special one. I probably should call it NPC. And I've got fighter, cleric, dwarf, elf, halfling. So, you know, if you roll NPC basic and you roll 1 through 6, it'll be, let's say, an elf, a basic elf. So you'll roll it on there. But then I also put parties on here as well. And here I put basic and expert separately. I guess I don't really need to do that because when I was building it, I thought I was going to do 2 charts. So I'll actually fix that now. I hope you liked the video. If so, please do like it and give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, do all that good YouTube stuff. I want to thank Only Crits for sponsoring this video. Like I say, I love their dice. This project sounds really cool. Guillmans Guide to Speed. If you're into that kind of stuff, check it out. Even if you're not into it, check it out. It looks like it's real fun. I'm thinking I gotta have some fun arcane punk airplanes in my game soon. That just sounds so amazing. Let me know in the comments below if you want some cool arcane punk vehicles in your campaign. Also, in the description, you're going to find all the regular links. That is to my podcast, to the podcast I do with KR, to my Discord server, which you should join up. It's really super fun over there, and also to my Patreon. I'll talk to you soon.